Hi, and welcome back to my kitchen. This week, we're sticking to our routine. We've got 2 proteins, multiple meals, and 0 starting from scratch on those crazy weeknights. This week, I'll be prepping some ground beef and some chicken breast to make several different dinners, and then I have a repeatable breakfast and lunch because decision fatigue is real. For breakfast, I've got some high-protein breakfast burritos, and then for lunch, I've got a spicy tuna bowl that is so easy to put together and actually keeps you full. In this video, I'll walk you through exactly what I'm going to be prepping, how it all fits together, and how this sets us up to have a healthy dinner on the table in less than 15 minutes on those crazy weeknights. So let me show you how it's done. All right, let's map out this week's menu. For breakfast, I'm keeping it simple with breakfast burritos, and lunches are spicy tuna bowls that I'll eat all week. For dinners, I'm sticking with my usual formula, 2 proteins that turn into 4 meals. Monday's a Philly cheesesteak, skillet. Wednesday, we're using that same ground beef again for a quick beef and broccoli bowl. And on Tuesday is chicken fajitas. Thursday, we're using chicken again for an easy honey mustard chicken. 2 proteins, 4 dinners, and meals that come together fast during the week. Next up is prepping the proteins for dinner this week. And I'm keeping it super simple as usual and just focusing on ground beef and chicken breast like I mentioned earlier, since those are the 2 proteins that will carry all 4 dinners. For the ground beef, it honestly couldn't get easier. I just cook it in a cast iron skillet and season it simply with salt and pepper. Since the meals later in the week have their own sauces and flavors, I like to keep the base pretty neutral so it works for multiple dinners. For the chicken breast, I split it into 2 batches so it's already flavored for different meals. Half gets garlic salt, which works really well for the honey mustard chicken later in the week, and the other half gets taco seasoning so it's ready to go for fajitas. Once everything is cooked, I just transfer the proteins into glass containers and store them in the fridge. These are my absolute favorite. I will link them down in the description below. Having these already done makes dinner during the week so much faster because the hardest part, the protein, is already cooked. Next up is carbs for the week. This week, I'm keeping it pretty simple with gold potatoes. For the beef and broccoli, I'll serve that with rice, but I usually just make the rice the night of because I prefer it fresh. And for fajitas, we're just going to use tortillas. So there's really no carb prep needed there. So the only thing I'm prepping ahead of time this week is the potatoes, which will be used for 2 of our dinners. I just quarter the gold potatoes, spread them out on parchment-lined sheet pan, drizzle them with avocado oil or spray them really, and season with garlic salt. Then they go into the oven until they're nice and tender and roasted, and once they're done, I let them cool, store them in the glass container or a larger container I can find in the fridge so they're ready to reheat during the week when we're assembling dinner. Next up is veggie prep for the week. This week, I'm slicing up peppers, onions, and mushrooms, which will get used across a couple of dinners. First, I saute the peppers and onions in a cast iron skillet. This will be the base for the chicken fajitas later in the week, so I like to cook them ahead of time until they're nice and soft with a little bit of browning. And then in that same pan, I cook up mushrooms and onions for the Philly cheesesteak skillet. This combo adds so much flavor, makes that dinner come together really quickly once the week gets busy. Once everything is cooked, I just transfer the veggies into containers and again, store them in the fridge. And having these prepped ahead of time just makes assembling dinner during the week so much easier. Next up, I'm prepping breakfast for the week, which this week is breakfast burritos. These are super easy because instead of cooking eggs individually in a pan, I just bake the eggs on a sheet pan. It's actually very similar to how I make my egg bites, but baking it in one big pan makes it really easy to cut into the portions for the burritos. To make the egg mixture, I blend together eggs, egg whites, and cottage cheese. I thought I could fit everything into the small blender cup, but I was wrong. So everything ended up going into the big blender instead, which is fine. Once it's blended, I pour the mixture into a parchment-lined sheet pan, and then I top that with everything bagel seasoning and a little bit of shredded cheddar cheese. Goes into the oven until the eggs are fully set, and then I cut it into pieces and start assembling the burritos. Just roll and fold the burritos, wrap them in foil, and then I store them in the fridge for the week. If you'd like, these are really freezer friendly. I usually do some parchment paper and then foil, and then I put them in a Ziploc like freezer bag, but I knew I was going to eat these this week. So just into the fridge they go. When it's time to eat, I either microwave them or I throw them in the air fryer to heat them up. Lastly, I'm prepping lunches for the week, which are spicy tuna bowls. I start with a few cans of tuna, and it really just depends on how many days you're prepping for. This is the kind of meal prep version of a poke bowl. Obviously, it's not the real thing, but the flavors I think get pretty close, and it works really well as a quick lunch. I will say this is one of the most protein-packed lunches. One serving has over 40 grams of protein, which is actually a lot harder to get in a single meal than you might think, and that's one of the reasons why I love making this. Instead of using full mayo for the sauce, I mix together Greek yogurt, sriracha, soy sauce, and just a little bit of mayo. Stir that until it's nice and smooth. Then I pour that sauce over the tuna and mix everything together really well. For a little crunch and extra flavor, I add chopped green onions and sesame seeds, and then I also chopped up some cucumbers to have ready for the bowls later in the week. Totally optional, but I just feel like those little additions bring much more flavor and texture. And then you know the drill. Pack everything up, refrigerate it so it's ready for the week. And when I make lunch, I'll just serve this with some rice, shredded carrots, avocado, and the cucumbers to turn it into a full bowl. And that's everything I'm prepping this week to make meals a little easier during busy weekdays. Having these proteins, carbs, and components ready ahead of time makes it so much faster to throw together lunches and dinners throughout the week. And if you want to follow along with this exact plan, you can download this week's menu and prep guide below. If you're also trying to keep your family eating well during busy seasons of life, make sure to subscribe for more weekly meal prep ideas. I try and do these weekly, and then next week, stay tuned as I show you how these meals actually come together. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.